I'm Bill Oughton of Oughton Claims Management.
I'm Chantel Roberts of CMR Consulting, and welcome to the Art of Adjusting podcast.
Today, we're going to talk about life as an insurance adjuster from the perspective of property, auto, liability, or workers' compensation adjusters. Our goal is to bring interesting topics in the world of claims adjusting to people who are working as an adjuster now and to people who are considering a career as a claims adjuster. Hey, Chantel, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
Pretty good. We're welcoming in the new year, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Can you believe it?
Can you believe it?
Like, woo!
2025. Well, today we got a special guest. Why don't you go ahead and tell us who's here today?
Yeah, we have Mike Connell or Michael Connell. He is a licensed private investigator who specializes in accident investigations since 1992. He partnered with Andrew Bone and formed Risk Jockey because they recognized that securing evidence from law enforcement was really labor intensive. And I know me getting it myself when I was a adjuster, it just took forever. And, while adjusters can get it directly, it's, the following up, like I said, that just totally bogs us down. So this is where Mike and Risk Jockey can help. So, Mike, welcome to the Art of Adjusting podcast.
Hey, I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking to you both.
Mike, your business is not just FOIA requests or FOIA requests, but you also do other types of investigations as well, correct?
Well, generally, I just to back up a little bit, I've been a private investigator since 1992. So
Okay.
my career has been spent investigating claims on both sides. But after 30 years in the field, we decided to pivot and got more into the open records application. Just because really where we got started was when body cameras got deployed. We found that that was going to change the way claims were investigated, but it was just really hard to get those records. So we started chasing down body cameras, and then people asked us can we get 911 calls? Can we get photos? Can we get other accident reconstruction? So we launched a full-fledged open records application so we could chase down records from every agency at one time and just save a lot of people a lot of time and aggravation.
It's interesting that the niches that you can find within certain industries, and this is one of them where, sure, a desk adjuster could do the work and get that stuff, but they've got other stuff to do too. And if they can find somebody like you guys to go and take that off their plate for them, it makes sense. So that's kudos to you. That's awesome. So
Thank you.
so
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit. I have some questions for you,
Oh my
Mike.
God, I've got questions too.
I've got one very important, hard-hitting question that may make some people uncomfortable, but what is it? Is it FOIA or FOIL?
Oh, it's FOIA.
FOIA.
But
All
there
right.
is now, in full
There's
disclosure,
no
in Georgia, it is
conspiracy. I don't
in
know.
Georgia, uh,
Oh,
in
funny.
Georgia, or excuse me,
Nice.
in New York, there is the FOIA law, Freedom of
Right.
Information Law. So FOIA is generally the federal term, but there is the FOIA law in South Carolina. That's what they call their open records law. They have the public records law in Florida,
PLA?
California. Florida is the Florida Public Records Act, and then you have
PRA.
yeah. So then you
Okay.
have in California have the same thing, California Public Records Act. So there's different
Interesting.
terms, but it's generally open records is the term that most people know.
I'll accept that application and remove my tinfoil hat because it's really
Oh,
itchy.
I have questions though, Bill. I mean, did it block out transmissions from the mothership? I mean,
No,
Mike,
no, it
sorry,
actually
we're gonna
came
have
in
to.
clearer.
Okay, wait. So I always like to start off with definitions, of course, Mike. And can you explain what FOIA is? And I think we kind of figured it out when we were talking about quote unquote open records, but what is open records versus what is not or whatever? I mean, like what can we as adjusters get, I suppose? What is FOIA? What does it mean? That sort of thing.
Yeah, generally, anytime law enforcement is involved or any type of first responder, it creates a record. Now, when it really depends on a couple factors when it becomes an open record. It's an open record generally after a case has gone to court or citation's been issued. And then all these information is generally public record. The stuff that's not public record is maybe when a minor is involved or there's some serious injuries. You're not going to get video of situations where there may be some HIPAA violations. But generally, anything government related is subject to open records, and there's very little protection in that regard, because open government is just it's a big hot button issue now, especially with body cameras.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
My understanding is that everything that's created by a public entity becomes public record unless it's exempted. There are 9 exemptions under the FOIA law. And if it falls under one of those, then you can't get it, basically. So
Would that be
any,
like the open cases, like a murder case? And the reason why I ask is because I think Bill and I were talking about this the one of the past podcasts where I've had to work, not necessarily quote unquote a murder case, but you have property damage when there has been a murder. Obviously, you know, the gunshots have gone everywhere. And so you've got to plaster or repaint that wall or whatever. So sometimes insurance does answer to that.
there's
Yeah,
a lot of reasons I've been denied. Sometimes it's an ongoing investigation. Sometimes the last one that was rejected was an assault case where the person accused of the assault was charged and went through a trial and was found innocent, and they sealed the record. So we couldn't get the records anymore. So
that is possible. Sometimes you've got to get in there before they seal the record. Sometimes there's a delay. Sometimes that's up to the defendant to do that. And sometimes they don't want to spend the money, or they don't have the time, or they didn't even know they could do it. But in general, you are correct. I still, as a private investigator, I still do some premises liability where there are shootings on maybe convenience store property. So we are retained occasionally just to find out what the police know, and a lot of times it's just so the adjuster or the attorney client that I'm working for, so they can set their reserves. They don't have any idea. Nobody will release the video. We don't really know what happened, so sometimes we can intervene. Now down here in DeKalb County, we have found that you can sign a deal with the district attorney, a confidentiality agreement, if you agree that, hey, this is for a civil matter and you're just trying to explore and get some information. So that is kind of where you can kind of pierce that veil, because ever since COVID, the courts have been so backed up. So some of these cases might not go to trial for 3 years. Well, you can't hold these claims hostage for 3 years. So there is a way to get in there and get the information if you agree to keep it confidential.
yeah, you can file for a court order in certain circumstances. The example I just gave, that was one of the options that they provided, is that if we filed for an order from the court, we could get it released. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I think it will. But yeah, so it is interesting the breadth of the material you can get from law enforcement, and sometimes on a relatively minor case, we do a blanket request for pretty much everything they have, and sometimes you get it. Sometimes you got to be careful what you ask for because you might get it. And we wound up with I don't know how many video files and audio files and stuff that was largely irrelevant and very expensive for us to pay for and get, but we got it, and it helps us to evaluate the case. So, but I will say that we had a lot of video of cops driving in cars to the scene, pretty boring stuff. But we also got actual footage from the scene of the accident minutes after it occurred. The victim was laying on the ground still. The equipment and the machines and everything were still in the place that they were when it happened. And you could hear the voices, and the officers were taking notes of the people they talked to. So we got all the contact information for everybody that was there. So it's very helpful to get that stuff, even though sometimes it seems voluminous and maybe a little excessive. It sure does help.
How much does it usually cost?
Well, that really
It depends. Yeah.
Yeah, that really depends on the agency. A lot of the rule of thumb is if it doesn't take more than 15 minutes to prepare, the records are to be free. but sometimes it does take a lot of time, and a lot of jurisdictions still feel the need to redact, although that's not the law in Georgia. You don't need to redact anything for law enforcement. If something is released in error, they're not held responsible. They do their best not to send anything out that's gory or involving minors, but generally, it just really depends. Some agencies charge crazy amounts of money, and we try to help our clients and fight that, and some don't charge anything. They just try to make it easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times they're just covering the cost of the CD and the, what thumb drive or whatever they've got to send to us. There was a time in New York where New York State police reports were $20 or $25, and just for a standard, accident report, auto accident report. And I think one of the insurance companies filed a lawsuit against the state, stating that those were excessive. And I think now it's $15. So
I'd still.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be a profit center, but
Yeah.
it is a tremendous burden on law enforcement to staff these, especially with the advent of body cameras, because everybody wants it now, almost whether they need it or not. There's a big demand.
Yeah.
Getting that video is out. It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I get it. And we should probably be more selective about what we request on cases, because if it's a minor damage, we certainly don't need all the body cam footage if it's a small property damage claim. So yeah,
I can see where it
interesting.
would be good for like a he said, she said kind of case, because I know that I have followed up with agencies like the city or whatever for the traffic cameras on lights, because I mean you never really know exactly what time a loss happens. They'll say 11:30 or something like that, but at least you can find, if you request maybe 15 minutes on either side of that, you can find the insured's car and whatever, but you're looking for who had the red light, or because both will say, no, I had a green light or something like that. And I found it particularly interesting and helpful then.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't mean to minimize the value of video evidence. It certainly is very, very important, but uh, recognizing the burden that you place on these agencies to pull all this information together. I know the one agency here in New York, um, I get notices all the time back that it's going to take 6 to 8 months for a response because they're overwhelmed with requests. So, what do? You sit and wait, I guess.
Mike, is that normal?
No, that's not normal, but for some of the bigger agencies, it is. Now, we do have some agencies that put out that standard response, and then all of a sudden you get something in 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know if somebody's told them, hey, put the word out. But a lot of times, some of these cases there's citations issued. So they're thinking when the court date is. But a lot of the police chiefs know, hey, we got to get these records out. And we had one local police chief said, hey, when our officers leave the scene and the investigation's over, don't hold this over their head. The insurance claims adjusters, the people involved in the accident, they're probably local residents. They need to be made whole. So get this stuff out of here. They don't make them get a subpoena if it's minor. Now, if there's some vehicular homicide or some serious negligence, hey, we've got to hold on to it. But the general rule of thumb is get it to them. Don't make people get a subpoena because they're going to get it anyway. You're just causing a lot of problems for everybody. And we just keep beating the door down. And eventually, if they see Risk Jockey enough, all right, these guys aren't going away. We just got to do that.
Yeah, I love that. What you're saying is because it's very important for us to do a timely investigation. And it's like if we're just waiting on that one piece, sometimes the insurance company gets sued because the claimant may not believe that we're honestly waiting on this piece of information that the police need to send to us or whatever, so that we can just verify that this is actually what happened. So I love the fact that y'all are doing that.
Well, the best thing you can do, and it is definitely going to sound self-serving, but if you think you might need the records, you need to order them as soon as possible, because there's such a volume of records, especially video, that they're not going to hold. If there's a citation is not issued, some of these agencies don't feel like they're obligated to hold on to these records, but there's a lot of argument in that regard. So once the records are gone, there's nothing you can do about it. So you've got to chase these down as soon as possible and just keep beating the drum until they provide the records.
Mhm.
So for an adjuster who maybe doesn't have the bandwidth or the budget to hire you guys to conduct a FOIA request, what are some best practices to make sure it's successful when you're requesting records?
Again, the biggest thing, and that's where it comes into play with adjusters, is they just don't have the time. And I'm definitely gonna blow our own horn here, because I learned in my career that when you're making a request, you're usually going off the police report. And the police report is not generally, doesn't have all the information. The perfect example I'll give you is in Georgia State Patrol. When an accident is investigated by Georgia State Patrol down here, we're talking 30,000, maybe 50,000 accidents a year. Well, they're not the first person on the scene. They are pretty much coming in and writing the report. So if you come in there and you make the request, you want to get the records from the local police department, the sheriff, the 911, the fire, the EMS. They're all different agencies. Georgia State Patrol has the dash cam. They don't even have body cameras. So they have dash camera video, and they have audio, which is great. But a lot of times they're there after the scene has been cleared, after the interviews have been conducted, and you'll see that when they arrive, you'll see there'll be a sheriff's vehicle, there'll be a police officer there, and he'll come over and say, hey, here's what happened, or here's the driver's license, that guy's gone, they're at the hospital. So the best practice is to do it early. You've got to do it early and make sure that you're hitting all the agencies. When you make a request to a state patrol for the 911, they don't have the 911. That's at the county level or the city level, and that's where you're getting your impartial witness. You may just have somebody that called and said, hey, this red truck cut in front of that tractor trailer. That's an impartial witness. You have their phone number, and there's really not much you can do once you get an impartial witness involved. That seals the deal.
I like that. In fact, when I was looking at your website, I was kind of giggling because you have encapsulated exactly what the adjuster feels. And one of the things that you had said was you make that request and nothing comes. You call them. They said, oh, it's like $3.50. So you get a check, you send it off. You call them again because you haven't gotten the report, and they're like, what check? We didn't get the check. So you have to cancel the check and then reorder the check and then send the check again. And you follow up and you follow up and you follow up. And then they've lost the request, but they've got the check. And you're just like, oh my gosh. And one of the things that you're mentioning, and again, I'm going to toot your own horn, even though I don't like, infomercials or whatever, and I've never used you, so this is completely independent, is that you're kind of like a one-stop shop because you are absolutely right. The adjuster doesn't have time to call the 911 people, to call the sheriff, to call the city, then to call the state police. I mean, that's like four people right there. And then you got the EMS, the ambulance people and all of that kind of stuff. So it is hard for the adjuster to do all of that.
Yeah, and it's impossible to do it in a timely fashion, especially if you're handling 150 cases a month. And as you know, as adjusters, when that phone rings, you don't know what's on the other end of it. You've got a claim that could come up and just block out the next week. And good luck getting somebody on the phone at the police department who knows what you're talking about and can put their hands on the open records request. So it's just, you've got to follow up. That's the key. There's no magic bullet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just police reports either. It's also, building departments. We get records from building departments or social services for inspections of properties, dog bites. So we'll get, dog bite reports from the health department, lots of things lots of other official requests that we have to make that aren't just police reports. What do you have as advice or techniques for when a request is denied and you have to appeal it?
Well, you've got to make sure, you got to really know why it's denied. Some people just deny it, just make a blanket denial. And what we do is you've got to look through it. And sometimes they deny it, and you don't realize, well, it was a minor. You look and go, well, wait, this now I understand this is a minor. You got to know your case and know what the law is. But the other issue is when they do make a denial, a lot of it is they just don't want to do it. And what we do is we make an immediate file here in Georgia. We make an immediate claim with the Attorney General's office. We've got pretty much a hotline right to them, and then they fire off a letter to the police department, and lo and behold, those they get turned around. Yeah. So you've just got to know the law. You got to know your rights. Pretty much everything the government does is an open record. Emails, everything is an open record. They shouldn't be deleting anything. It's
unless
crazy.
It's subject to one of the 9 exemptions.
Yeah, there are exemptions. Obviously, there's certain matters, but
what are those 9 exemptions, Bill? I mean, obviously, open.
They're a little wordy, but anything protecting national security, internal personnel rules and practices of an agency, information that is prohibited from disclosure by some other federal law, whatever that means, trade secrets or commercial or financial information that is confidential or privileged, and the rest are pretty wordy here. I would Google the 9 exemptions under FOIA and take a look and study that till your eyes bleed.
So here you go at The Art of Adjusting. We just tell you to Google things.
We'll put a link in the show notes for sure.
There you go. So yeah, there you go.
From an accident and claim standpoint, it's generally a minor HIPAA issues, and
right.
if the case is pending.
I was going to ask Mike if you find, and I think you've alluded to it, that sometimes this evidence is deleted or thrown away. Is there a normal time frame for that? Because a lot of times when, let's say we have a theft at a convenience store, I will ask for the security cameras for the insured, and they're like, oh, we reuse that tape every 3 days. And I'm like, well, you returned this thing in, 15 days later, and you didn't save that. It would have helped me. Is there anything for states or any kind of FOIA timelines?
Well, generally, it's kind of above the pay grade of the people at the convenience store sometimes, but you got to have correct counsel and pay attention to spoliation laws. If there's something happened, then you can reasonably assume that litigation might be necessary or might come of it. You need to preserve it. Now, an example down here, there's a county down here again, DeKalb County, Georgia, where they instituted a law that you have to put premises cameras. You have to have security cameras on every convenience store, and they gave everybody about 6 months to ramp up to that. You have to hold on to this video. I believe it's 45 days, and you cannot delete it. You have to have it has to have certain quality and characteristics. And I understand why they're doing it, because, man, there's a lot of violence at some of these convenience stores, and there's a lot of activity that the video can help settle a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Don't municipalities and law enforcement entities, aren't they subject to records retention laws that would force them to keep some of these records on file for a certain number of years?
Yeah, the jurisdictions, they vary. The rule of thumb is if it can be reasonably assumed that a video might be used for litigation, it needs to be retained. And generally, that varies even up to about 3 years. It should be retained. Now, what the law enforcement looks at, some of them look at it and go, well, citation was an issue. We're out of this. And that's a point of contention. We can argue it left and right with the agency, but once they delete it, it's gone. So we try to tell people, again, get the video. If you think you might need it, get it, because they're not going to hold on to it. When the body cameras came out, a lot of these companies that did the body cameras, they also, where the money was made was in storage. So it's almost like the printer and the ink situation. The printer was $100, but the ink is where they make their money on. A lot of these body camera companies come in and they're paying, the agencies are paying for storage. And sometimes they've got these cameras set on high def, which is really 3 times the storage. So they're getting these storage bills every month. They're like, let's get rid of this video. If we don't need it, get rid of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I did find out, mostly because I was very curious. I saw some police officers eating at Chipotle one day, so I just walk up to them and I'm like, are those body cameras? What do they do? When do they turn on? Could you have to turn them on right now? And I came
Did
to
they arrest you?
no, they didn't. They just, I mean, look at me. I'm a something year old, white woman from Overland Park. I am not a threat to them. And I'm in Chipotle. So they
They
weren't worried
just
about
they
me
just
at
don't know
all.
you very well. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. They haven't heard of me yet. So they're like, yeah, whenever we turn on our uh, sirens, it automatically turns on. Everything automatically turns on. The voice recorder, the body cam, all of that stuff automatically turns on. And I thought that was absolutely fascinating. So we don't even have to worry about them forgetting to turn something on or whatever.
Yeah, it
Well,
depends on the level of product they have. Some of them do turn on automatically. Some of them are manual. When they first came out, a lot of the police departments basically said, when you have an interaction with the public, you need to turn it on. Like when you walked up to those people, they probably turned their cameras on. They've had people walk up to them and admit to a crime or have a witness and they forgot to turn their camera on. Like, oh, why didn't I turn that on?
Yeah.
yeah.
But so generally it's when you interact with the public in any official capacity, you need to have your camera on.
And I think, over the past 10 years, we've certainly seen events that suggest that it maybe remind officers that their behavior is under scrutiny as well. Um, so interesting. Um,
Absolutely. Uh, Mike, I was going to ask you, where are you speaking? Are you doing any kind of conferences? Uh, we have 4 listeners. I don't know if you knew that or not. But we've got 4 listeners. So how can our 4 listeners like get in touch with you? What are you doing in the next couple
Well,
months?
right now we're evaluating our options for 2025. We've got as you know, you can go broke on conferences and speaking arrangements and the like. So I just completed a podcast for the International Association of Special Investigation Units. I like to say, and I don't want to offend anybody on either side, we're basically Switzerland. So we assist the personal injury side, we assist everybody. All we're trying to do is get the records and level the playing field. So we go to claims conferences, and we also go to there's truck accident seminars, and they're in the same boat. Everybody's just trying to get the records and just really make people whole.
I don't think there's any bias to obtaining records. We all want the same information in front of us to make decisions, both, on both sides of the aisle, for sure. But what states do you serve?
We are nationwide.
Nationwide.
Yeah, so nationwide, like I said, it's a one-stop shop. There are certain jurisdictions that are a pain in the neck, some more than others. In full disclosure, I went to Auburn, and Alabama is probably the worst state for open records. Somehow they got in front of this whole craze of open government, and you need subpoenas for most everything over there. But what we try to do in that regard is we'd say, hey, at least preserve it, and now tell us how to get it. And that's what we try to accomplish in some of these states that are a little difficult. North Carolina won't let you see body camera. You can go to the police department and review it. They won't disclose it. Same thing with South Carolina. They're very close to the vest on body camera video. But in general, you just got to make the request and then see what happens and just keep chasing it down. And generally, people are pretty respectful and responsive.
Yeah.
When you bump up against a situation that requires a subpoena, do you make recommendations back to the client, or do you have a counsel that you can work with that will get that subpoena filed?
Well, we generally, to get a subpoena, you need to have a suit filed. So a lot of these claims in Alabama, there will never be a suit filed. You're just trying to get information to make somebody whole. So we'll try to get a letter from the agency and say, hey, number one, we've preserved it, and here's the steps you've got to take. And again, sometimes the laws are changing all the time. What happened here in Georgia, I wasn't aware of, that you can make a deal with the DA and go down and review it. Um, and it just, it seems like they're trying to make it easier because it is such a burden on their staff. But
And when
again,
you, just to clarify, when you say a deal with the DA, this is a situation where you sign a non-disclosure agreement, correct?
yes, it's a confidentiality agreement. Now, I didn't do it. I was working for a law firm, and they just started doing this. They said, "Hey, can we
Interesting.
make a deal with
Okay.
the DA?" So it is something. I've got a couple on my plate right now where I've got to. An issue that comes up a lot is hit and run accidents, and hit and run accidents, they rarely get closed because they'll never be closed. So how do you close them? And if somebody's really injured, we've got a hit and run accident. A perfect example is there was a hit and run, but it was because of a shooting, a random shooting, and somebody was killed.
Hmm.
So we're trying to get the records because of an accident. And the police are like, yeah, well, there was a shooting. And I said, well, when will you close this case? And they said, well, we can't close it because then the next of kin will be like, why did you close this?
Right.
But they'll never find out who
Right.
shot this random bullet in the air.
Yeah.
What about when you bump up against HIPAA rejections for HIPAA privacy issues? Do you ever obtain an authorization from the parties involved to actually disclose any private information?
Yes, we've had to actually adjust our website for certain jurisdictions. Perfect jurisdiction is Chicago. They want a letter of rep and a photo ID um, to release records. So we get our clients to upload a letter of rep when they do it. And then now we've just decided for any kind of EMS record, if our clients can upload a HIPAA release, that helps a lot. But yeah, with a HIPAA release, we'll chase down everything we can. Um, and there's usually they're just looking to protect themselves. They have no axe to grind. The agencies, hey, get us a HIPAA release and we'll give you what you want.
So that brings up a good point, is because a lot of times I know Bill does this when we have a liability claim and we're needing to get medical records or whatever, we do send the claimant or the claimant attorney an authorization to get that medical records or whatever. And I would think that that would also help you if we're trying to get that, FOIA request or those open record requests or something like that, is to forward you a copy of that authorization as well.
Yes, and we have a question on our, one of the questions we ask is basically, do you have a HIPAA release? And if you say yes, upload it. And then what we'll do is we'll send that to any agency, pretty much any agency that we're requesting records of, just to, hey, if there's any doubt, well, if somebody's injured in a body camera video, that's sometimes they say, hey, we don't want to release this. This person was injured, and it's a tough situation. So if you have the HIPAA release, you trump that.
Would you need a release from our insured as well? Because normally we did not get releases from our insured, because while they may be injured, I mean, that's like a med pay claim or something to that effect. We may not be focusing on that liability aspect because there's two people, let's say, in a car accident or whatever.
I would think for a
Everything you
HIPAA
have
denial, yeah. Go ahead.
everything you have can help, and there's an option to upload anything you have. The perfect example for a HIPAA release from your insured where that would help is in Alabama, 911 recordings. They want a release from somebody on that recording to give that record, somebody who called in or was subject of that 911, and that helps. So literally anything you have, we pretty much ask for it. If you've got an ID, a driver's license, upload it. And then we'll help and show that, hey, we are justified in getting what we have. You're legit as the adjuster. Yes, you have an interest in this claim. And we just want to expedite the release of records.
So it goes beyond just HIPAA authorizations, which are primarily to get health related records. But if you've got a situation where, like one of these exemptions, if you've got a commercial or financial information that's confidential or privileged, let's say you have a policyholder who happens to be a company of some sort, they've got trade secrets, but there's some investigation going on that involves those secrets, and they won't release it because it's private information. I would think there'd be some mechanism to get an authorization from that company to say, hey, police entity, please release these documents because we're requesting them. And that actually leads to another question about what about the people what if I get in an accident and I want the records myself and make a personal request? You might not have much experience with that. I don't either, but I just wonder how those are handled in terms of privacy issues as well.
No, we do have people that come to us as drivers and they just want the records. Generally, they were not at fault, but they want their own records. And if they say that they're the driver and they are on, if you are on the accident report, that pretty much trumps everything. What they'll do is look, okay, Joe Smith made the request. Joe Smith's on this driver's report, or he's on the accident report. That's usually enough. If they ask for a little bit more, that's fine. Sometimes we'll get a driver's license from them. But if you are, the key is being on the accident report. That's where a lot of attorneys and adjusters, that's where they have an issue. Sometimes you have adjusters that are working for a subsidiary of a major insurance carrier, but the subsidiary might not be named on the policy. So that's not what's on the accident report. So you've kind of got to show that you have an interest and that you are on the report. Being on the report is key.
Good.
Yeah, so we're an independent adjuster. You're a third party as well, servicing, insurance carriers or other individuals or entities. And you're the one making the request. In some cases, we have to have not just a signed authorization, but also a letter just showing that we're an agent of whoever we're asking on behalf of to accompany it. So, but like you say, every jurisdiction, not just jurisdiction, but you got state government, local, county, they're all different, and some of them are very tight and difficult to get into. Others, it's like Maybell down at the desk. You just go down and talk to her, and she hands you an envelope, and you're on your way. So it's interesting. We only do it in New York State. I can't imagine nationwide. Some of the states that you're talking about, Georgia, South Carolina, what'd you say? Alabama sounded pretty bad too.
Yeah, Alabama's pretty tough. But then you have some agencies in Alabama that just don't, they treat it, they just don't care. They don't say they don't care. They just don't want to make your life difficult because
Right.
they know we're going to get the records. Somebody's going to eventually get these. Why make it so difficult?
Yep.
But some people just like to dig their heels in. And on the note where you mentioned, yes, we do have some clients, some insurance companies that give us a blanket release that we can show, hey, yes, we do represent them. But there are steps on our website where people give us the authority to act on their behalf.
Very cool. Well, if somebody wanted to initiate a request with you guys, what's the step? What's the process?
Well, the best way is just to go to riskjockey.com and you can just start making a request. If you've never used us before, you just jump in there and start making a request. If you need, there's also a demo selection in there. You can go in there and select and create a request a demo. My calendar will pop up and I will do a demo with you online and walk you through it. The system is incredibly intuitive. So most people, once they get into it with a demo with me, like, oh, I could have done this on my own. But I have no problem. I enjoy giving people the lay of the land.
Cool. And deliverables by email, fax, carrier pigeon. What do you guys do?
Play tablet.
Once the records start to roll in, you're notified by email, but you also have a control panel where you can log in and check the status of your case. And we retain all the records. So if you download it and lose it, we've always got a copy that you can go in there and get another copy. We also integrate with practice management software, the likes of there's a huge practice management software called FileVine. We're working on some integrations with some claims management software. Just because right now, some adjusters that use us, they come in, they make the records, they make the request, we get the record, they have to download it, these huge videos, and upload it up to their computer system. So we've got the ability to just totally take over that process.
Very good. Well, that's awesome.
Well, wonderful. Well, Mike, thank you so much for speaking with us today. It was very educational, and I think that this would be a great thing for most adjusters because it is kind of like one-stop shopping. We just don't have the time, unfortunately.
I was just talking with a potential business owner yesterday, a young man who's setting out on his own business, and we talked about all the little things that you do in a business that sometimes it's worth passing off to somebody else who can either do it better, faster, or cheaper. And I think what you have here is an example of that, is that, we get so busy and some things it's just better if we can outsource some of the stuff because somebody else can do it better. And that's what I think you've got going here. Great job.
Good job.
Well, I appreciate it. I actually still do some minor investigations here and there, and I use Risk Jockey. I just say, you know what? I put all the information in there. In a matter of days or maybe weeks, my screen will populate and say, hey, there's video available. I say, okay, now I can jump in there. I can start reviewing the video and just work on that investigation.
Very cool.
Well, very good.
Well, thanks
Well,
again, Mike. Great to have you.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Great. We'll put all your contact information in the show notes. And I guess that does it for this episode.
Absolutely. And Happy New Year's, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy
Thanks,
New Year
Mike.
to you. Thanks again.
Take care. Thanks for joining us on the Art of Adjusting podcast, where we talk about life as an insurance adjuster.
If you enjoyed this podcast or this episode, please give us 5 stars and a review. It does help the algorithm pick us up.
Hit that subscribe button real quick and tell all of your adjuster friends to check this out as well. For independent adjusting services, go to www.auton.claims. And for anyone interested in working as an independent liability adjuster, go to the Contact Us tab to join our roster.
In the meantime, you can contact me at theartofadjusting.com for consulting and training purposes.